Hello, welcome. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. If you're joining us from out there on the internet, either in the present or in the future. My name's Levi. I work here at Jack Straw Cultural Center. I manage the artist residency programs here. One of those is the New Media Gallery program, through which we're very lucky to have Tara Youngborg here presenting her work. Today is the last day, so if you are not physically here or on your way here, we'll be here for a little while. If you're watching right now, come on down. It's cool. You've missed your chance, at least in Seattle, but this show might pop up elsewhere, it sounds like. I do want to start by mentioning that today we're meeting on the lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot nations and other Coast Salish peoples, past and present. And the staff, board, and artists of Jack Straw Cultural Center acknowledge that we're living, creating, working, and playing on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle and the Salish Sea, and we honor them and the land itself with deep gratitude. And I also want to mention, I looked, so there's a website called Native Land, native-land.ca. I looked up Frenchtown on there, so that is the land of the Lenape people, I believe. Is that right, as far as you know?
Yes.
So thank you to them as well. Yeah, thanks to Daniel and Tom for being here, making all of the technology happen. And thanks to the organizations that fund our residency programs, City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, Port Culture, Washington State Arts Commission, National Endowment for the Arts, the Lester and Phyllis Epstein Foundation Arts Fund, and individual contributors. We thank you all. Donations and grants, big and small, all help make it happen. We have another installation opening in just 2 weeks from tonight, actually. River Coelho's installation, Hampi, which will be a completely different thing. And River is going to join us. They live in Florida. They're going to come and give a performance as part of the opening reception. So that'll be Friday, April 3rd. So I hope you can join us for that. And I think that's all of the things I need to say. So thank you for being here. Enjoy, and I will hand it over to the wonderful Tara Youngborg.
Fabulous. Thank you, Levi. Hi, everyone. My name's Tara Youngborg. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, so I am also from away, and I'm so grateful to Jack Straw for inviting me or accepting me to the New Media Gallery Fellowship. This has been a great experience. The team's been really wonderful to work with. Super, super fabulous time. Speaking of which, I do have a long list of thank yous for everyone at the Jack Straw Cultural Center, folks who helped me record, stream, sound engineer, coordinate all of this. Folks who've helped me with kind of some audio recording prior to coming here, people who've kind of provided archival support. Towson University and Jack Straw both provided financial support for this project. A specific shout out to the Tweety and Pop Ace Hardware here in the University District of Seattle. I think I went there 4 times during the install, and they were really fabulous. I love Ace Hardware. Anytime I do an installation, I'm always at the hardware store buying new pieces. Specific shout out to all of them. I'm going to reset my timer so that I don't run over. So my background is actually I started as kind of a net artist, web-based artist. I would create interactive art websites and videos, GIFs, a lot of things that were very easy to travel and to show because you just had to send the files over. But over the past 5 years or so, I have made my life harder by working in installation, taking my code-based and video-based works and transforming them into installations where I'm, projecting video or code into a sculptural space, creating kind of an immersive environment. I am particularly interested in kind of the interface of memory, place and space, and technology. So I'm very briefly going to go over some old projects just to ground us in the history of my work. But here from 2022 is a piece called Confluence. It's live code that's taking kind of video from different bodies of water. It's pixelating them and moving it through the gallery space, and it's being reflected off of plexiglass and wood shapes that are based on coastlines. You'll see plexiglass, and you'll see kind of certain materials end up being through lines for me. And also in 2022, I was working with ideas. I started working with ideas around machine learning and artificial intelligence. I was interested in exploring how this technology that's not necessarily new, like, folks have been working with AI since the 90s, AI in the kind of contemporary sense, and certainly with intelligences before that. But I was interested in how these models are kind of being used commercially. So I was doing some work with memories. So this is a actually kind of live code as well. There's an Arduino sensor that brings up different images, and I was engaged with like the prompts and the things that are restrictions. And I also wanted to control both the input and output of what I was doing with machine learning. And so like I trained a neural network on my own images, about 2,000 of them, which is not a lot. The things that are used online are usually billions of images, because I had this idea about co-creating memories with technological models. But then I became really interested in how abstract the kind of structures and images that came out of that were. And I would then feed the output back into the model and say, okay, I want you to kind of focus on the the things that make your images kind of true to them, that are inherent to the model. And so then everything became even more abstract and blobby. But the reason I was using technology, part of it is I truly do not think that you can work in a artistic medium without talking to the processes that are inherent to that medium. I think that painters are inherently talking about the canvas and that surface, or printmakers are engaging with ideas of the multiple and the matrix. And so if you make work with technology, you also have to engage with the ideas that on how that technology operates. So I'm always kind of looking self-critically at myself and my own tools. And a big part of that is glitch and glitch theory for me. So a glitch is a failure of a piece of technology that makes visible how that technology operates, or how it's designed and built, or the assumptions that make it up. It can also just be something that interferes with the frictionlessness of the user's operations for the technology, how we work through it. It's impeding our flow as we move through a space, or we try to use something. An example I always like to talk about is if you're watching a video, because I'm often doing video work, and it's being live streamed, and then it starts to freeze. With digital video encoding, oftentimes part of the video will freeze and other parts will still move. And you see it looks kind of blocky and pixelated, but it's not like, the scan lines of old analog video. And that's telling you something about how that video is encoded, how it's trying to save space, by saying, well, these blocks of color are similar enough, and there's movement here, but there's not movement there, and how that, when it's put together. So then I understand a little bit more about digital video encoding. And I also think, well, not just me, I would also say that the theorist Legacy Russell wrote this book, Glitch Feminism. It came out, I think, in 2020. I can't believe that that's kind of older now, but it's a really great book. And she talks about how glitch is also a conceptual technique that we can apply to social and political norms. So we can use glitch to challenge not just kind of physical and technological processes, but kind of greater structural ideas. And I really like that kind of glitch, both in the technological sense, glitch in the conceptual sense. And I'll often use glitch to challenge archival narratives, to challenge my own subjectivity when I'm recording sites and researching. And then also to challenge our our larger perspectives on loss and archives, technology and data analysis. And then one more older piece, and then I'll get to Frenchtown. I'm gonna play this, and then I might just like bring the sound down. So there we go. The speaker's going to be. So what I realized, this piece was kind of a project I worked on for a few years, and I presented an iteration of it at the Delaware Contemporary back in August. And I realized that what I was, so first of all, this is, I've been calling this like an experimental portrait of a site, which is Mine Bank Run in Parkville, Maryland. And so what I did is I would go out to the park where this river was located, and I collected a bunch of field recordings, sound, video recordings. I went over the course of several months. I put a GoPro on a children's fishing rod, and I tossed it into the to the river, and I called it GoPro fishing. I did 3D scans of the space and created like cyanotypes and sculptures that were like edge-lit plexiglass that were translating water flow data into color. It also gets translated into color and projected onto that mylar that's reflecting kind of watery reflections on the walls. And what I really wanted to do was take as much data about this site and say, and then like create this portrait of the space. And because I realized what I was interested in with kind of artificial intelligence or machine learning was that it ties into our assumptions about technology. We have this inclination to assume that if we collect a bunch of data about anything, about the economy or the environment or people's voting habits, we can shove it all into an algorithm and create a perfect solution. Like if we just had enough data, we could figure everything out. But also at this time, I was reading this book by Jer Thorpe called Living in Data, really great book, where Thorpe talks about how when we're collecting data, it's inherently limited by the tools we use, the assumptions we make about what is important to collect, by what we think is important to collect. Those all are decisions that we are making. And so that's going to shape the information we collect, and it'll shape the results we get. So there's no way to be fully without bias in kind of creating these data. So I created this portrait. I said, here's a bunch of data, and it feels like a little bit of a scientist laboratory. And it's there's an obfuscation. Like I wanted to kind of make it opaque for folks. Like you would try to explore, which is what I would do. I love kind of finding or like researching a site or a space or a concept and doing this like deep dive and then making the viewer also do the research with me in the installation. But also creating something that's like aesthetically interesting, so you want to kind of explore through all of it. And that's where I was at when, oh, the video is going to play again. There we go. When I kind of encountered Frenchtown, Maryland. So the Newcastle and Frenchtown Railroad, which this installation is centered on, really the installations, the railroad and the ghost town of Frenchtown, Maryland, is one of the first railroads in the country. People kind of, like, there's been reports of it being both the second and the third. I maintain second, but it operated from 1831 to 1859. It ran between Newcastle, Delaware, which is like also a relatively small town, and it's like it's south of Wilmington, Delaware. It's still oh my gosh, I think an hour by car to Philadelphia, and then down to Frenchtown, which was on the Elk River. Which was kind of an offshoot of the Chesapeake Bay, a very small kind of farming town. Let's see. But this town, like, and this route was typically used by people who were traveling between Baltimore and Philadelphia. It was not an enjoyable trip. To get from Baltimore to Philadelphia, you had to take a steamboat from Baltimore down the Chesapeake Bay, back up the Elk River, get off in Frenchtown, which had, one kind of tavern-y lodge space, to, get lunch, and then get on this train, which, second railway in the country. It had no brakes. It had no cattle catcher. The first trip they took, actually, they didn't realize that for a steam engine, they needed water. And so it took them 3 days. Luckily, this was just a trial. They did not have any passengers, but they kept scooping water out of like streams and wells on their route to refill the engine. That didn't happen again, but it's still... it was kind of very jostling, jumpy. That is apocryphally, Davy Crockett perhaps rode the railway and said that it was a jumping and a jittering, I believe was the quote from him. And this is 16 miles, so you can do that in like 30 minutes by car now. It took 56 minutes on the train, on this train. And then when you got to Newcastle, you had to get on another damn steamboat and to go up to Philadelphia. So it was a full day trip, not efficient. But it was much faster than kind of going by road, than by taking kind of a carriage with horses on this route instead. Before it was a railroad, it was a turnpike. So it was an improvement over kind of other travel conditions in the early 19th century. So these are some images of Frenchtown. These are some of my archival research. Both of these paintings are by Benjamin Henry Latrobe. And the one on the left is a painting from 1806. There's the wharf where people would get off their ship and take, at this time in 1806, it was the turnpike. They would take their carriages. But then Latrobe also was part of the surveying team to plan a canal and the railway, or the turnpike that became the railway. So this overhead is actually a map of Frenchtown and the planned canal route or canal construction. But so even before the railroad was built, Frenchtown was a small settlement, primarily a transit link. It in its heyday, it still only had a few farmers that in the tavern space I mentioned, and then some warehouses. The most notable thing about Frenchtown is it had a very minor role in the War of 1812, which was that the British burned it down because the residents of Frenchtown did not try to defend it. They all left. But those, as they kind of ran out of Frenchtown, they went to Elkton, which was kind of the town north, and warned those folks. So Elkton was able to rebuff the British. um, and but yeah, and then this railway only ran for, like I said, 28 years. What happened is they built a railroad that directly connected Philadelphia and Baltimore. And so there was no need to take two steamboats as well. So everyone started taking the other route. And after the railroad was discontinued, the space was abandoned. A lot of the property owners sold their land. It became largely farmland, so just fields. And today, actually, it's privately owned by a property management company that has plans to turn it into a waterfront park. Which I had to find out because I was trying to figure out how to get on the site to record. So I had to go through like land ownership records and write them a note. And they let me go out, which was good. But yeah. So anyway, this town, I was really interested. Like I was like, oh, I'm just going to do another like data stream. I'm going to make another portrait of this space that where I collect kind of water flow and air quality and land ownership values. But then I was like really interested in how this town is like analogous for other obsolete technologies like abandoned online video games or startups that have failed. And then I also realized that the railway itself is a network, like the internet. And I just really loved that metaphor, kind of how that is extended. But also even more than that, these spaces and communities are shaped by market influences. So, the railroad was built after the Newcastle and Frenchtown Turnpike Company wanted to bring in passenger and cargo travel revenue. The railway, when it disappeared, they stopped operating it. The rails, actually, some of them were used in construction for the American Civil War for infrastructure. The space itself was really shaped by kind of the technologies, like the flow of people, and the literal kind of shaping of the landscape. I mentioned some archives at the top in my thank you. I went to the Delaware Public Archives, the Cecil County Historical Society. I did Library of Congress, actually has a lot of really great digitized documents. Both of these are from the Delaware Public Archives. And what was really interesting to me as I was doing research about Frenchtown was that most of the information the documents were focused on finances and stockholders and inventors and landowners, as you could only find the names of landowners. And very little of this archive included kind of the personal or the everyday. So these two documents here, the document on the left is actually the survey document. It's like a little book where I believe John Randall was the surveyor for the railroad route, walked from Newcastle to Frenchtown and noted, oh, we're going to need to buy this land. We're going to have to move the railway this way to account for, a stream. They had to build a couple culverts to go over like streams and bodies of water. So yeah, he created that. So they have that, and then I found so many copies of the stocks for the company, so you can get a share in the stocks. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so funny. Like I just they have all of these blank kind of copies for this company that no longer exists of empty stocks that you could fill out. But again, like the things that really informed this archive are capital, land ownership, and colonialism and expansionism. You know, the railroad moving people throughout the United States as it was colonized. And historian and philosopher Michel Foucault actually talks about the archive as a discourse between those in power who determine the information and narratives that are written in history. So this archive for Frenchtown is what has influenced our collective memory about this space. And it is, again, all about power and finance and settlement. Some of the other documents that I still think are informed by these things, but where I was able to get some of the text that comes into this installation. On the left is actually a family history written by my great-grandmother. And on the right is a book, A History of Cecil County, Maryland, written by George Johnston in 1881. So after the closure of the railway, but still kind of contemporary to it. So he had written quite a bit about Frenchtown. People were still living there at that point. And I did kind of bury the lead with this. The reason I found out about Frenchtown is that my great-great-great-grandfather was one of the station masters for the railway. He was the second to last station master. And my great-grandmother, Anna von Goris Hutton, she wrote this family history and talked about that. And then my father made photocopies of it and gave it to all of his children. So as I was like thinking about sites to make a piece about, I was like, well, you know what, like, I know that, like, you know, Dad's family, like, was in Delaware and they came over to Cecil County. Let me go, like, take a look at that. And then I was like, oh my gosh, wait, this guy was, like, the station master of a railway. And I kept reading about it. And that's how I ended up in here. So that's, you know, so actually some of this, I believe the next clip will be a video that uses some of this text from Anna. I was really interested in collecting this archival information, but then also clipping it, making it less easy to understand and read, like making it disjointed, removed from its context, looping it and almost turning it into sound instead of meaning. And to show you what I mean, we'll like play this clip.
Also in Frenchtown to accommodate the passengers, and Frenchtown became a town of importance. It consisted of a tavern, some warehouses, a dock, and little more.
So that's actually my sister reading my great-grandmother's words for that clip that's in the installation. A couple other spaces or things that I was investigating in this. I've keep mentioning the Frenchtown House, the kind of inn/tavern. It was like the only building to survive the 1812 burning by the British, but it did burn down in the 1950s during my father's youth. When my father was living just adjacent to Frenchtown on the land that the station master, my great-great-great-grandfather, had purchased. But there had also been a lot of ghost stories about the tavern. One of the owners, his granddaughter drowned in the river right out in front. There were stories of people seeing kind of soldiers, or there were vortexes in the space. And I thought that was like a really kind of, like, I think that we always are trying to kind of magically make things more haunted, but then also for the ghost town. This being the last thing there, of course, it's holding that the majority of the memory of the site. And here's a clip of that video. The tavern's invisible guests. So I'm using some of the text from the archives about the girl drowning, but then I'm also turning some of the words into sound. And that happened actually in the first video clip as well, like where my sister was talking, and then all of a sudden you hear this like kind of wall of sound, which I think was me saying Doc again and again. Yeah. And another technique I've been using to both uplift and challenge these ideas of data-driven analysis for the past few years has been data sonification, which is the process of translating numeric data into sound. It might be like pure tone or musical notes. So I'm going to play a short clip. I was checking the length of it. So in the installation, the sound pieces are like I wrote a computer program to translate the color data from the video field recordings. Like each pixel in that video has a red, green, and blue value to be displayed on your computer monitor or TV display. So I wrote a program that says, okay, I want you to take the red, the green, and the blue, and I want you to translate that into the frequency of a sine wave. And so then it would create like a chord. And so that this creates like a really abstract connection between the site. I've had this video, but then it's kind of being played back to us through sound in a way that's really abstract. I like sonification because it's a way to create sound in an interesting way. I'm not a musician at all by practice. But it's also, we're not really acclimated to trying to interpret data through sound. We're used to visualizations, like seeing kind of graphs or pie charts, and graphics that are posted on Instagram. But we're not used to hearing sound and translating that into, okay, that's what this means. Even though our ears are more sensitive to changes in sound than our eyes are to changes in kind of visual, kind of color and visual quality. And so I'm still holding you back from understanding. I'm saying I've translated this data for you, but I'm not giving you the full understanding of this, which is in kind of glitch terms, a tactic of refusal. Yeah. Whoops, playing it again. So I'm going to walk you through kind of that sonification process that I just talked about. So this is a screen recording of, I use this programming language called processing. It's designed for artists, so it's very visually friendly and simple. I super recommend it because I am not at all, also, I am neither a programmer by trade. So in this, the code that's on the right is creating an output for here, that's being displayed over here. And what I did is, for this example, I have water flow data in a comma sorted value spreadsheet that I got from the U.S. Geological Survey. And the box, the color is changing based off of the value for that water flow, the discharge. So discharge is the thing. Frequency is, again, kind of the sine wave oscillation. So you'll hear it, and then you'll also see the color, and you'll read the numbers. So I was like displaying in multiple ways. You know, this, in the installation, you're only hearing it. But for this, I wanted to show the whole thing. This is like not a pleasant sound as a heads up. But so it feels very random because, you know, for this one, I think it's collecting that information every 15 minutes. And, you know, as things rain, you know, over the course of the seasons, it's going to be different. So it feels very random at first. It feels very computerized. So I wanted to be able to kind of interpret that into something that was more appealing. So I would record that output and then use Ableton Live, which is a digital audio workspace software. It's actually, people mostly use it for live performance. I do not use it at all for live performance, but just for kind of composing and editing things. But I would bring that kind of mess into Ableton, and I'd say, all right, now I should stay closer to the microphone. Here, I think I have like a laser pointer option on here. There we go. I would bring it into Ableton. I would ask it to convert it to MIDI. And then I would say, okay, also, like, let's move it into a key. So I think for this one, I was doing A minor, just to kind of give it a little more musical structure. But you can tell right now they're all very tight. So it's still like, you know, all over the place. And what I would do is I would listen and then kind of slice just a small section of that data. And I might like lengthen the notes, you know, the amount of time that it plays. And I think this was a screenshot from my Ableton software for the piece that I'm going to play next. So I think here at the start were the musical notes where I had, again, said, okay, now let's like slow them down so they sound like notes instead of like just kind of crazy noise. And then I would add that back into the composition. After I added it into the composition, I also took it back out to the field. So this is a video my friend Kelly took, or this is a photo my friend Kelly took of me. Because when I dragged her out to Frenchtown in a kayak, like we both took kayaks out and kind of entered as you would have if you were taking the steamboat to the town to take the railway. And I made her hum the musical phrases that I had received from the data into a mic at the site. I was like, what happens if we're like bringing this, like, you know, this data's been transformed and we've brought it back to the site. And I was also thinking about the early 19th century, kind of the community that we don't see, those the people who are not in the archives, and you know they would be singing together in church, or at the cookie swap, or at their social events. So I loved this idea of bringing kind of humans back into the space to hum and to create music. So this is a clip from that. Oh, let me bring it up. Right. Great. Okay. So, yeah, and so there were digital instruments that were, the violin sound or that kind of funky, I think it was like a marimba almost sound at the end. And I also was using the audio workspace to feed that audio input back into itself. So you'll hear this more in the installation, but there ends up being this kind of like very glitchy, like, like what happens when you put a mic too close to its output, like the feedback. But I was like, oh, well, that's what I'm doing conceptually. I really like the idea of having that happen in the audio. I love a glitch. I want to kind of bring it back to net art and like my talk a little bit about kind of the installation, the kind of physicality of that. Like I said, I used to do kind of internet pieces. This is a diagram that this artist collective, MTAA, created back in 1997, and I love it. And it's about net art, artwork that's between two networked computers or internet art. And so, yeah, it's the two computers, lightning bolt in the center, the art happens here. So it's not happening at the computer, it's happening at this interface in between. It's in the in-between space. But actually, I really think that this is inherent to, this is how I think about all art. Like when I'm curating an exhibition, when I'm creating art, when I'm teaching a workshop, it's less about the art isn't necessarily the object or the final product to me. It's that space between the viewer and the object. It's that interaction. And so that's why I think I create pieces that I want people to like investigate or think about. And I love talking to people about art and hearing people's interpretations, even when it was not at all my intention for whatever the pieces happened. Because again, I think that, the piece is completed by the viewer, and really the piece is completed by the interaction between the viewer and the artwork. I was also thinking a lot about space and site specificity and about how we use our digital technologies to kind of understand and interpret the physical world. And back in 1989, this theorist, Marc Augé, wrote this book, Non-Places, An Introduction to an Anthropology of Supermodernity. And he talks about this idea of a non-place, which is, divorced from history. It's a temporary area. It doesn't integrate with its surroundings. And he's talking about things like airports and highways and supermarkets because it's 1989. But I was like, oh my gosh, no, wait, this is this is kind of our digital spaces. We kind of digitize and encrypt and reinterpret and transmit our experience of spaces and places. So a location, instead of being, I mean, even tonight with this live stream, like some of us are physically here at the Jack Straw Cultural Center in Seattle, and some people are, in different places in the United States. Some people are in the future watching this in the past, and so like this place is now digital. It's now kind of, and it's also overlaid over our physical experience. So I'm very specifically thinking about my video recordings and interpretations as non-places. And that's often why I'm putting like text and maps and glitches into my interpretation. And in this video, which has, it's not supposed to have sound. I had to re-export it a couple times. But this is part of a clip that is in one of the video installations. It's shown at the bottom of the kind of projected mesh fabric structure. But I'm wearing a GoPro on my chest, and I'm recording my screen on Google Maps as I walk through Frenchtown. This is kind of the path I'm walking out to the water. And so the internet and these digital spaces are like a fourth dimension that's overlaid over our physical experience. And so I was like, I'm going to make that literal, which the fourth dimension was coined by Lawrence Scott. And I think also, the title of this exhibition, Not a Town But a Landing Page, is kind of a malapropism of a quote from historian John Monroe, who said that Frenchtown was not a town but a landing place. He was kind of being kind of mean about Frenchtown, again, being a very transitory space. And I changed it to a landing page because it's a network space. It's a website. It's the landing page. And as I did all my research, I was on like the Library of Congress website. I was on people's blog posts. I was on Google Maps. It was my experience of this space was networked from the start. I was researching how to contact the people who own the land, and then getting their email and printing it out like that says like you can walk past the no trespassing sign onto this site. I was like, I don't trust that easy. Let me print out a copy and bring it with me. No one questioned me, but I was like, I need more than just like the digital version of that email. I need the physical. And then let's see. I'm gonna play one more clip if it plays. Nope. I know, yeah, right? All right. Come on, buddy. Well, if it doesn't play, it's in the room. It's a clip from the haunted house anyway, but mostly just like kind of as some end thoughts. I'm particularly interested in visual and information literacy and encouraging. There you go. It's because I muted the dang thing, so I couldn't hear it. So yeah, I'm particularly interested visual information literacy, like I said, in getting people to slow down and kind of be open to multiple levels of interpretation of anything, like a piece of art, but also, a news article, a piece of literature, the information that we kind of receive from our networked devices constantly every day. I really think that's so important for us to kind of critically examine these discourses of power that shape our understanding of space and like our assumptions about the world that we live in. And I'm really hoping that we kind of move from this like static understanding of knowledge to this kind of idea of knowing. Like I really like the idea of like knowing as an active verb, where we can be engaging with the subjectivity of data. And particularly because power is shaping our ways of knowing. And so in this installation, I've created this simulacra, this like immersive kind of simulation of Frenchtown that's experimentally kind of depicting the site, but also it's thinking about the technology. It's thinking about how technology shapes our space and our understanding of a space, and it's showing kind of the limitations of data in the archive. All right, thank you. Any questions?
I was thinking about you talked about glitch beyond technology, like whether society or culturally, like other examples. What is an example for those of us who are trying to bend their brain around that, like something?
Yes.
Is it just sort of the things showing their works, or
how is glitch kind of perceived in these social or structural ways? So I think one way that or an example that Legacy Russell uses that I really love is that queerness as glitching kind of conceptions of gender, is kind of breaking beyond binaristic understanding of gender roles, and refusing to kind of operate in one kind of gendered space or another. I think about another kind of like one that's like also really rooted in power. I think that the ways that people are showing up in protest in our contemporary moment are also kind of glitching. The idea, I see a lot of people talking about immigrations and custom enforcement as not a policing unit, and so like kind of pushing against like a narrative of power, but also these like structures where we're like, okay, like that's not I refuse to accept this as kind of legal authority. And that's actually, I think that kind of the history of kind of resistance also ties into that. Kind of anyone who has to break a law that's unjust. And sorry, I went like kind of all the way to the top, but I think but that trickles down as well. Like people who are creating, I have a friend who's really into operating in temporary autonomous zones. This idea that you can have a space that is not kind of beholden to ideas about kind of capitalism, or like that we have to exchange some kind of fiat currency for services and goods, that we can live outside of those structures. Yeah.
You're in Seattle, we know all that.
That's right. Yeah.
Cool. Question.
Yeah.
You have like the U kind of shape of like the drapery of curtains.
Yes. I didn't talk about that at all. Yes.
Did you try other shapes, or were you always like drawn to like the kind of square?
Yes. Okay. So I meant to say that. I've been like, I was like, oh, I gotta talk about the sound here in this. Sorry, I'm trying to find a video that's gonna show it. So the mesh fabric structure in the center of the gallery actually, there we go, operates on a couple different levels. So I am thinking about it as first kind of symbolically as the ticket booth. So Newcastle and Frenchtown Railroad was the first railroad to have a ticket booth, and the ticket booth still exists. And actually, the sign here is from Newcastle, Delaware, where they have it on view. So I created this structure that was the ticket booth, so you can go stand inside the ticket booth. But also, I wanted a material that would be able to both like hold the video and then let it pass through to create this visible glitching of the video. It's really lovely. Sorry, I don't usually use PowerPoint, so I am like fighting for my life to get the videos to play. Oh, this was a dark one anyway. But there we go. But yeah, so the video itself, actually I love like this example, these thorns and this line, which I went through the trouble of like coding that, and then someone was like, oh, you can just do that in After Effects. It's like there's a plugin, but you feel surrounded by it. And like similarly, I had kind of some plexiglass at the objects in the front, because plexiglass does a really good job of also reflecting fragments of the video back onto the walls, and then also holding the video. So I was really interested in these materials that are kind of translucent and interpret and distort the video, and then also implicate the viewer's body. When you go in and walk in, you're interrupting the beam, and you can't not be in the site or also part of the glitching and interpretation. Like you all just heard me talk for 40 minutes about Frenchtown and presumably have not been there. But now my interpretation is what you've taken, and like you are going to further distort and interpret it. Yeah.
Oh, I think I heard you mention that there's going to be a next iteration.
Oh,
Is
yes.
this opportunity to address
Yeah.
the internet?
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I will. This body of work will be on display in Washington D.C. this summer for the month of June in Hillier, International Arts and Artists at Hillier in DC. It's right next to the Phillips Collection. It's a great little space, and I think it'll open like June 5th. But yeah. So if anyone's over on the East Coast, over in DC for any reason, come check it out. Yeah, thanks so much. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate everyone tuning in and speaking with me. And yeah, check out the installation. And have a good night.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks. All right. Cool. I think that